So yes, I say it started in 2010 with an aim basically to work with organizations to introduce environmental management and to start to understand what sustainability is and how they can start to implement that across their organizations. So we work with a range of businesses across various sectors, from construction to manufacturing to health and veterinary professional services, and also local authorities as well. So the idea is that we're a support scheme. So whilst we help the organizations develop environmental management, we do that along with support officers who basically work with the organizations to help them understand and essentially break down sustainability into manageable pieces so they could look at implementing it. We found at the time environmental management systems were fairly complex, fairly complicated, and we wanted to basically design something that could be easily accessible by any organization, regardless of size or starting point as well. So over the last 13 years, we've accredited hundreds of organizations, and we use a criteria that was developed by experts in the field. So it's actually an evolution of various projects that we ran as PECT that was looking at how to get environmental management and sustainability into corporate world. So our mission is essentially to enable rapid, impactful action on business. We want to be the accreditation of choice, and our members will be cutting their emissions in half by 2030. So that's something that we have as in terms of our mission and our obligation to work with our members to help them understand their carbon impacts and to work towards cutting their emissions in half by 2030 in line with science-based targets and obviously the roll towards net zero as well. We want to make it easy and rewarding for everybody to do their bit for the planet. And essentially, as part of the certification, the accreditation we go through is to actually give organizations credibility. So not only do we help them understand what sustainability is, but we actually help them to develop the right tools, the systematic approach, and the evidence that they need to be able to put forward their claims with actually substance behind it as well. So should anybody question or ask, they're able to actually demonstrate the work that they're doing, and always working towards preventing eco harm and minimizing our impact on the climate. So as a scheme, we work with any organization, and what we're really looking for an organization to do is to sort of essentially upskill themselves, to build in-house skills so that they can understand sustainability, how it applies to them as an organization, and how to implement an impactful management system. As part of the process, we want to integrate environmental improvement into working practices. So, as anyone who's worked with environmental management, it is about continual improvement. So it's always looking at where there's opportunities to make impactful change. And obviously, in line with the current government obligations, looking at the pathway to net zero, and in terms of what that actually means for different organizations in different sectors and at different sizes as well. So really, what we look at, what we really started out was to actually work with organizations who didn't quite know where they were or what it is that they needed to do. So we help them understand their starting point, understand what it is that they need to do to start. And we're there all the way along with them to support them and to help them to actually implement the right sort of systems and approach to their objectives. In terms of the criteria, so this is sort of the process that we take organizations through. So, as you can see in here, we sort of help them to understand the initial sort of setup, putting the right resources in place to be able to implement a system. So appointing green champions, developing policies in terms of their objectives and what it is they want to achieve. We help them to set up resource measurement systems and processes so they can actively look at what it is they're doing and also measure any impacts that they make. To help them understand targeting and action planning and how the two sort of work hand in hand and how to think about the sort of actions they can put forward and what changes they can make for us, both in the immediate term and also the longer term objectives as they work through the certification levels. Key focus around waste, travel planning, and carbon footprinting, and then as not just obviously focusing on the organization. One of the things that we introduce as part of the environmental management, as part of Invest as the Environment, is to also look at wider projects. So all of our members have to consider their own impacts, but they also need to introduce what we refer to as environmental social projects, where they introduce activities, projects, anything like that actually has a wider impact themselves. That could be community focused, that could be biodiversity focused, or it could be even things like health and well-being for staff as well. So, starting to consider that sort of CSR type of aspect to their approach as well. And then all of that is underpinned through communication and engagement. So, how to get senior management involved, how to get your teams involved, how to communicate to external stakeholders as well. So, not only are we developing it, but it's also making sure that they're shouting about what they're doing, really getting engagement through across all facets of the organization, as well as any sort of clients or suppliers that they work with as well. As Joely mentioned, we do have 3 levels. So we essentially look at working with organizations at different stages. And the way it works essentially is it's a progressive process. So most organizations will come on a bronze level. And really this is sort of the idea is to help them develop the foundations. So what are the key fundamentals that they need to introduce in order to actually manage and implement an environmental management system? So as you can see here, we're establishing things like the policy, we're gathering data, we're sort of starting to understand how to improve resources, we're looking at managing and reducing waste, calculating our carbon footprint for some organizations for the very first time, and communicating progress. And then as we work through the levels, so when we look at silver, we're now developing and actually starting to take what we've developed at bronze and start to actually apply it to business activities. So we're now looking at working towards achieving targets. We're introducing travel and that as an additional resource. We're not just managing, we're looking to minimize waste, we're improving aspects of the environmental management system, etc. And then finally, once we get to green level, which is the aspirational level for organizations, that's when we can start to understand that once the management system is embedded, we're now broadening the focus of what environmental action is. So here we start to actually think about things like what net zero means, starting to look at the supply chain and our procurement, really starting to look at the broader aspect that we have as an organization in terms of our role within the community and within our value chains as well. What else I just did as part of this is sort of breaking it down. So the criteria itself is fairly, it's designed in such a way that it's accessible by any organization. And the criteria is designed to create a foundation, sort of a format that any organization of any size can pick up and essentially work towards. What we then do in terms of the support roles, we help organizations to understand how to apply that criteria to actual business activity. So as I mentioned before, the key things that we're looking for is not just to have an environmental management system, which obviously gives them that foundation, but to actually use that as a tool to be able to look at what sustainability is for you as an organization and how to improve and develop that further as we work towards a net zero and a more environmentally friendly world. So key things that we take from this, there's 4 sort of core sections that we work with organizations. And as we can see here for bronze, this is a starting phase where organizations are at that sort of developing area where they're starting to think about what sustainability is, maybe just starting to introduce a lot of these concepts. And then we have 4 main categories that we sort of work with. So management, that leadership and governance, which sits around the policy and development, but that real engagement with senior management. Climate change, which focuses on sort of energy, but specifically around developing your carbon footprint and understanding how that applies to the organization. There's the nature and natural resources, which is around biodiversity or use of natural materials, and then pollution and waste. And then as we move throughout the levels, what we're essentially doing is we're just building and developing on these skills. So once we get to silver, like I said, we're developing sustainability. So now we're starting to show improvements, we're starting to show understanding, we're starting to be able to apply what we've learned and what they've developed as part of their foundational stage and actually apply it to the organization to really make improvements as well. So maybe this is the stage where organizations start to consider what net zero means to them, thinking about what staff engagement means to them, looking at expanding upon their carbon footprint and not just focus on the organization, but to start to include some immediate, what we refer to as scope 3, but essentially immediate supply or value chain factors. And then start to put forward real changes in terms of their waste and their awareness of how they're using and the resources that they're using on the natural world. By the time we get to green, this is where they're actually succeeding. So at green level, organizations are required to demonstrate improvement, and they do this by actually working towards at least where we try to work towards at least a 2% reduction year on year as a sort of starting point. And then obviously as they develop further within green, and that what those sort of targets look like are then relevant to the organization in terms of changes that they can make as well. But as you can see here, this is where they really start to show success. They start to show that good understanding in terms of environmental management, good understanding in terms of direction of what sustainability means, and really starting to make strategic choices in how they're developing and improving as well. And then what we are also considering is that once we've achieved green level, it's then thinking about what does that mean and actually what does beyond green mean. So for the organizations, not just looking at what they can do, but how they can now start to use their positions, and for some organizations, even a position of influence. So there might be an opportunity to think about, really working within their supply chain and actually starting to, engage, support, and collaborate with their suppliers to think about their net zero journey and what are they doing around their carbon impacts, to start to think about offsetting and insetting as part of their processes, starting to think about, what circular economy really means and how they can start to maximize and reduce carbon emissions through their value chain in terms of any materials that they're using as well. So as you can see, we start with organizations from the beginning, and we basically lead them all the way through to leaders within this field, so that all organizations have the strength and the ability to actually apply sustainability and make the changes that we need, in the ever-changing world that we live in, and for the future as well. So it's in terms of that support, as I mentioned before, we have got a support team. So there's a number of us that work with the organizations, and we help them to understand, we help them to progress. Every year we do an audit with our members. As part of that audit, we essentially we look at their performance against the criteria, and also against the the guidance that we've just gone through today in terms of those sort of steps that we're looking for organizations to develop, and then we help them understand what their next steps are, what the next year will look like for them as well. We also have an online learning management system, so all of our members have access to an online, essentially e-learning platform, where if they're sort of curious or not sure of any sort of aspect within the criteria or aspects of sustainability, we are in the process of developing this further and starting to offer more opportunity for them to actually take in-house training that they can then do themselves as a green champion, or actually deliver to their teams to upskill members within their team as well. As part of that as well, we also run an awards program. So every year we have our IE Awards, where we actually recognize some of the, shall we say, those organizations who have gone above and beyond in various factors as well. So every year in September, is it September? October, sorry, we run our awards scheme. It's an annual awards scheme. Like I say, we do tend to look and actually pull out some of our more outstanding organizations who've, as I said, gone above and beyond in various fields as well. So in a very, very short whistle-stop tour, that is investors in the environment. I appreciate it's quite a lot to sort of take in one go, but as I said, the sort of the idea is that we look to work with organizations at any level, at any size, and really sort of help them to develop and implement environmental management. And then through the levels, we help them to actually understand what that actually means and how to start to apply it to these sort of the bigger questions and the bigger challenges that we have around net zero, biodiversity, and more of the environmental challenges as well. Any questions? Or would you like to, if you want to go with what you're doing, Joely, and then? Thanks,
David. Yeah, happy to do that if that works. And then there might be some questions for both of us at the end, perhaps. That's lovely. Thank you. If I could share. Oh, sorry. I'll just wait for you to finish sharing your screen, please.
There you go.
Lovely. Thank you. Check that's coming through okay. Yeah. Someone just give me a thumbs up that that's come through okay, because I'm getting a circle.
I can see it. I can see a circle as well, but I can see your screen. So provided you're just on the front page, then that's fine.
Yeah. It's, I'll just try and tap through. Well, that's typical, Jane. We tested it before, didn't we?
I know, but it was perfect.
It's always the way. Let me just try that again. I'll perhaps try it on a different slide or something. No. Sorry, that's not helpful. Let me just stop the share and I'll share it again. Perhaps.
Yeah, I think that's probably going to be a good idea.
No, right. What I might do is not put it in slideshow, and then you can just see it like that. Is that okay with everyone? Yeah, you can still see the content then, can't you? That's fine. Let's do that. Lovely. So yeah, thank you, David, for taking us through that. That was a good, like you say, a whistle stop tour as to IIE. But so if I can just take you sort of back a little bit, obviously in terms of the council's kind of commitments that we've made so far. I think a lot of you will probably know lots of this anyway, in terms of the, I think my manager, Martin, has attended a couple of your meetings before. So you'll know about the sustainability strategy that we launched last year, alongside some pledges that we made, and the commitments around net zero. So for the council's own emissions to be net zero by 2030, and the area wide by 2045. So off the back of that, we introduced a members working group, which is a cross-party group. There's members from all political parties involved who meet on a monthly basis with the sustainability team and any other colleagues that we need to bring in on any sort of topics that we're discussing. So that's really helping to sort of drive the organisational sort of culture and commitments around sustainability. So we sort of raised this middle of sort of last year, I think it was, that it might be an idea for us to kind of work towards an accreditation to underpin the commitments that we've already made and help us to drive with some continuous improvement. Some of you might know as well, I was in a similar role at Daventry District Council, so we had IIE membership there, so obviously it was beneficial to us as a new council that we had that kind of officer experience of the scheme. And we did pledge to be, one of our pledges last year was about being a community leader in sustainability. So it was felt that if we could sort of look to achieve some accreditation for the work we're doing on our internally, then you know, we could look to lead by example. So in terms of why we went for investors in the environment, so David's obviously outlined a lot of the multiple benefits that there are, but for us, we wanted to the benefit of introducing a management system and the controls that then enables you in terms of monitoring your resource usage and being able to track data and then sort of look to improve on it. So that was a big driver for us, as well as the fact that we can look to showcase our achievements. So obviously for us as a council, that's quite important, and gain some sort of external verification of our work and the commitments that we've made. And also to groups like yourselves, demonstrating the commitment as to external stakeholders that we are trying to sort of lead by example as the council and influence others in the area to do the same. One of the further benefits, particularly for us as a team within the organisation, has been the leverage that it gives us to actually develop the culture and drive those change and introduce some of the implementations that were required. One of those being sort of a waste management plan that we've had to pull together as part of the accreditation work. So we were managing waste at all of our sites, and you know, we've got the right systems in place, but we hadn't necessarily documented that into a plan. So introducing and working towards the IIE has meant that we've pushed that forward. And you know, like I say, in terms of developing culture within the council, it just kind of gives us that driver to do so. And we also liked that it enables us to demonstrate ongoing progress and work our way through the accreditation levels. So in terms of our approach, David's slide was a much nicer one than mine with all the pictures of the different process. But so in terms of what we've done as a council, the scope that we've set are just our corporate buildings at the moment. So with a view to possibly extending that if we can bring more locations within to the management system, but the main focus for us was the offices that we operate from. So firstly, we've introduced an environmental policy. So that's obviously about gaining the leadership at the top for putting in place the process and the management system. That's gone through the approvals internally, and that will be made available on our website over the next week or so. And then we've worked closely with our assets team to gain some data on measuring the resources. So that's to start with gas, electricity, water and waste, which I've just already mentioned. So as you'll be aware, obviously the amalgamation of all the councils meant that we had different ways of monitoring the resource usage at all the offices. So that's been a bit of a task to bring it all together into one place and just get some baseline data. And then setting the targets, well, because this is our sort of first year of actually gathering all this data, we'll be setting our targets for 23-24 at the end of this month, at the end of this financial year, once we've got all of the usage data. And then obviously then we can look to try and improve on this current year's performance. We've introduced action plans. So for each of those resources listed above, we've got actions that we're going to look to try and put in place so that we can reduce the resource consumption. One of them being sort of an energy awareness campaign that we're going to look to try and do within the offices to reduce our demand in the first place. Waste management plan, again, as I've said, that was something that we were doing, but we hadn't necessarily documented it. So that's an improvement that we've put in place. The carbon footprint requirement, thankfully, was one of the things that we had already done and got under our belt. So as you'll be aware, the baseline emissions report was published earlier this year for 21-22. And I'll be starting the process of the 22-23 data in April. And then the additional project, there's probably a couple we could have chosen, but the one that we felt was the key thing that we've done over this first year really was the removal of the coffee cups, disposable coffee cups from our One Angel Square cafe. So that's just a cafe that's available to staff, but they estimated that they were using about 150 disposable cups a day. So we've put a total ban on them. They've now gone, and people have to bring their own cup or use a mug. So it's one of those small measures, but impactful at the same time. And then in terms of progress reporting, the members working group, obviously, who I've said meet monthly, they've been kept up to date with sort of the progress around our accreditation. And it's hoped that we'll sort of put an annual report through to ELT as well, so they can see what we've done to work towards it. And then communicating messages to staff. We're doing that quite regularly now, just to let them know that we're obviously trying to create this sustainability culture. And we've introduced a sustainability staff network. So that's for staff who have an interest in this area to come along, put forward their ideas, and also be a bit of a voice for the sustainability team sort of on the ground, if you like. So yeah, that's how we're sort of working our way through it. This document, so it's not overly visible, but it's just to show you an example of kind of how we've approached it, and worked with colleagues in the transformation team who've got some good project management experience. So we just kind of lent on them to have a look at the accreditation criteria for each of the different levels, and then sort of WNC's response, so things that we've already done and things that we then need to do to work towards. So as we go on to silver, we'll know we need to do a bit more around sort of travel, and so on as we go through the accreditation levels. So that's just to give you a bit of a working idea of what we've done. And then so our current position, so we're working towards the bronze level. We felt that was kind of, as David said, it's a good starting point. And as we're still a relatively new organisation, it will take time to kind of build that management system through all of the business processes. So we're working towards that with our audit pending over the next few weeks, actually. So yeah, look out for some communications around that when we hopefully get the accreditation through. And just sort of, even attending meetings like this and you being able to put the message out there, we're hoping to obviously encourage other businesses by sort of setting an example that we as the council want to lead on this, and hopefully others will look to do the same. So that's kind of, yeah, that's all my slides. That's the formal presentation. Happy to take any questions for David or myself. I've just put our shared team email address on there. So if you wanted to follow up anything afterwards, or if you've got any other queries for us in the team. And then we've also got a Twitter account that's separate to the council official account. So that's run by our team. We share some sort of good tips on there, and always looking to increase the following. So yeah, please do share and follow if you're on Twitter. I'll stop sharing my slides, Jane, and then if anyone's got any questions.
And can I, before we go into questions, because there are a couple, can I just confirm whether you and David are happy to share your slides afterwards, so that we can sort of circulate those around people to look at them a bit more? Is that okay?
Happy to.
Thank you. So we had a question. I think this is probably aimed at David, or perhaps at both of you, but Dave has asked if you can explain a little about the circular economy.
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess the easy way to think about it is, there's two types of economies. There's a linear economy, which is when you manufacture, you sell, you use, and you dispose. So from birth to death, it's a very straight line. What circular economy is looking at doing is, how do we actually keep those materials in the system longer? So various things you could do. So things looking at like single-use disposable plastics or single-use items, and trying to find ways to either remanufacture those or produce them in such a way that they have a reusability, a recyclability, or an opportunity that any materials that within that repairability, for example, to sort of keep it in as well. So for lots of technology type equipments, there's a directive essentially that means that repairability and reusability needs to be sort of put first and foremost in any manufactured items. And so for organizations particularly, and again, it means different things to different organizations, but particularly when you're looking at procurement, is when you're purchasing things as an organization, it's starting to think about not buying in those single-use things. So as Joely did with her project, looking at single cups, but actually bringing in something that could be used again and again and again to sort of eliminate a waste stream, and also a material being used, shall we say, almost unnecessarily within sectors as well. So for manufacturing and production organizations, is to think about how would you build your projects in such a way that they actually have a longer lifespan.
Thank you, that's really helpful. I don't know if Dave's in a position to answer whether that's answered his question. I think that's really helpful. I think from the point of view of consumers, it's really important, isn't it, that circular economy is built in at the manufacturing stage, rather than putting all the emphasis on consumers trying to dispose of stuff responsibly, or actually with a lot of things that are produced today, that's almost impossible.
Yeah, absolutely. And it does, and there's lots of policy that's driving that change. But I think even as any organization, it's just making smart choices in what you purchase. So things like not buying single-use materials if you can, and where you're able to do so. So that would be the sort of things that even us as individuals can consider, just like what our purchase choices are, and how we can sort of work towards that. So
thank you. So another question from Ella. This is a very key question. What is the cost of accreditation for an organisation, and how much time would that organisation need to commit?
Good question. So we have got, sorry, let me just remind myself the answer here. So we have different costs depending on the support. So we have three sort of price plans. We have a basic price plan, which is sort of just aimed really at small organizations. We have a more advanced price plan, which is aimed at sort of medium-sized organizations. And then we have enterprise level, which is aimed at really large organizations, or organizations with complex, shall we say, requirements. So that could be larger groups, could be multi-site or multi-level organizations. For basic level, sorry, apologies. I don't, 83, hang on. The basic level is essentially £996 a year plus VAT. Advanced is from £1,459, and we say from because there are options to potentially look at different carbon footprint requirements. Some organizations at the advanced level may have complex carbon footprints that they wish to calculate, and we have the ability to be able to use secondary platforms to support them in doing that, and that obviously has a varied cost. And then enterprise level, as I say, aimed at really large organizations, and again, that's from £5,000. But for most organizations, yeah, for who come in at sort of just small organizations, and by small we mean 1 to 50 employees, single site organizations, then that would be about £1,000 a year. In terms of time that you need to put into it, for any organization, I guess it comes down to what is best for yourself. What we generally would say for most organizations is, I would say, generally speaking, about 2 hours a month in terms of time to be able to do it. Now, what we try to do when we first work with yourself is to identify what opportunity there is to develop a team. So one of the key things you want to make sure that it isn't just a single person trying to introduce this to an organization. It is an organizational approach. So we look to support in terms of staff engagement, employee engagement, to actually get a team together to sort of help share the workload, so that this becomes a far easier task to undertake. And usually, so when members sign up, it's usually it can take as quickly, I suppose, as you're able to put the information together for the criteria. But for most organizations, they tend to go from start to shall we say bronze level certification within around about 10 to 11 months. So certainly within the first year, most organizations will be certified at bronze level. Like I said, bronze is foundational, so it's very simple, just developing the systems, and then over time you can start to add more and more to it as well. So it's a very, very staged process. Like I say, it was originally aimed at small organizations, but there is adaptability and flexibility within it to sort of deal with any organization of any size or from any starting point as well.
Thank you. I think the next question is from John, and this is perhaps for partly for both of you, perhaps for Joely. So this appears to be for large organisations. I think perhaps from what you've just said, David, perhaps that isn't the case, but what can WNC do to assist parish councils such as Flor? We have limited people resources, but we want to make progress with climate change issues, for example, a community solar panel scheme.
Yeah, so
that's a bit of a tough one.
It is. So yeah, I can't speak for the whole council, but yes, the community solar panel scheme is actually something within our team. So Felicity has become kind of the home energy expert, really. I'm going to use that term. She's become very clued up on that, and that's one of the projects she's looking at. So we used to be involved in the big switch at Daventry, which was around collective energy switching, and we're looking to roll that out to all of West Northants and also introduce a power purchasing for sort of solar panels as well. So that is something we're looking at. It's obviously you've got to go through the relevant approvals, so it's not a quick solution, but yeah, that's on our radar most definitely. And obviously, just in terms of what sort of support you can offer, we're a team of 4 of us now, so we do have more resource to be able to come out and speak to groups. So we're happy to try and help with any project ideas that you might have, and just trying to generally kind of influence our residents.
Did that help, John?
Yeah, I mean, obviously parish councils are all volunteers, so they don't have a lot of time. So getting things done is difficult. But we've got some enthusiasts around, and one of the projects was, as I said, solar panel community buying scheme. There's one, but there may be others. So if Joelle has got, I'll send you an email. Maybe you can, if there's anything you can do to help us, that would be appreciated. Yeah,
and I think obviously there are a lot of parish councils across the area. So if there's the opportunity to sort of provide standardised ways that people could do things or learning from each other, then I think that's a real benefit too, isn't it?
Yeah, biodiversity is one of the topics that they are keen on. But... All right, I'll send an email. Thank you.
Thank you. Lovely, thank you. So next question is from Eugenia, and she says, what encouragement do you have for small businesses to change habits, in particular the hospitality industry?
I'm not sure I can offer that much on that, really. Yes. So yeah, in terms of encouragement, we don't have sort of obviously sponsorship or anything as a council that we can necessarily offer, but again, it's just about trying to influence and build sort of networks so that you can share sort of the same experiences with other small businesses. So we attended a startup day at the Northampton Library around which was for startup businesses, just to try and understand their sort of barriers to engaging in sustainability and what support they would like to see from us as a service, as a council service. So we've then, as a result of that, I can't say too much about it, but we've put in for some funding application to try and offer some support to businesses on kind of a net zero journey. So yeah, we're obviously looking to try and do what we can as a relatively low funded service.
Thank you. Question from David Garlick. How do business and councils engage their customers stroke constituents in the journey they're on and the need for it?
If you have the answer, please tell me.
Yes, quite.
It's an ongoing thing, isn't it? It's continuing to just drive that message home, really, and just lead by example, as I've said, and just try and show the benefits to people. I think something we've learned is it's not the benefits of kind of saving the planet aren't necessarily the drivers for people. So for businesses particularly, it's going to be more around the bottom line, isn't it? And showing them the savings they can make by working towards a scheme like this. So reducing their gas, electric, water consumption is ultimately going to lead to savings for their finances as well. So
yeah, just if I can sort of to add to that as well, it's a very interesting question, and one we do get asked a lot by organisations, and I think it's I guess the answer is it just comes down to yourself. So generally speaking, what we do with our organizations is just to sort of essentially just talk about the things that they're doing, just to say, these are the stuff that we're doing. Why are you doing it? Well, what's the value? What does sustainability mean to you? What are your values as an organization? And just to talk about it and actually create that space for your customers or your clients to actually engage with that. So, get their input, get their understanding, and actually see if they can reflect those same values. So I don't think there's any sort of one way or right answer to it. For a lot of it is just, what does it mean to you? What are the values that you have as an organization? And, just talk and shout about it. We see lots of organizations that do so much, but just never actually say anything about it. So that's a sort of a good place to start, is just to open the conversation, to talk about it, and then actually allow that opportunity for them to actually engage back with you as well, to create that conversation, and then take it from there with a lot of aspects as well. And so I've just seen the second question you put up there, David. We do have a green directory page, so all organizations who are members with ourselves have an online page within our website. So we'll make sure the link is sent out as well if you're interested to see which organizations are members or part of us. They're all listed on our green directory page.
Okay, excellent. Two questions in one. And just on that sort of engagement and conversation piece, I think that is really, really important. And I think for people who are really sort of deeply engaged in the subject matter, it's easy to forget that other people aren't. So you do have to keep pushing the same message out there and out there. Just because you've done it once doesn't mean that people have taken it in, or don't need telling again. So a question from Rupert: does this accreditation just cover the council's in-house activity, or does it extend to contractors such as Kier or Norse?
Yeah, so it is just the in-house activity at the moment, but we do work closely with Kier and Norse, and obviously we know they have their own particularly net zero commitments, and I think they have a One Planet commitment from Kier. So yeah, they're definitely doing their own things in this area. So yeah, we will obviously look to influence, but they're certainly yeah, working complementary to what we're already doing ourselves. So
and of course, under the sort of carbon emissions reduction that you're doing, that would form quite a big part of the scope 3 section. So you need them to have that in order for you to deliver, don't you?
Yes, exactly, Jane. Yeah.
And can I just add, and then you have to extend to the 300,000 voters underneath you. So what you've done is grand, but it should have been done a long time ago. And you've got a huge mountain to climb now to get everybody doing something. Good luck.
Yes, there certainly is a lot to do, but yeah, it's important to be on the path. And actually, just on that topic, I was going to ask, I'm not directly related to the investors in the environment, but you mentioned, Joely, that the council had put out the report, its baseline emissions report, earlier this year for the council's operations. Is there a plan to do a report for, because we've got a commitment, or you've got a commitment rather, the council, to reduce emissions across the area by 2045 to net zero? Are those emissions being baselined as well?
Yes, they are. Yeah. So there's been an area-wide report that's also been written and just going through the approval process now. So that's based on national data, but we've just written a kind of a summary report really of that national data with just observations at this stage, and then that's following shortly. Good,
thank you very much. It's good to know. I had one more quick question for you, Joely, which was just, you said that you'd set up the staff network for sustainability, and I just wondered how much sort of engagement and how much interest you're getting in that, whether there's many people and how enthusiastic they are about it.
Yeah, so it started off as probably about 2030, something like that. We only launched it in, I think it was about September, so it's still a relatively new group. We've ran sort of a couple of in-house like events. We did a swap at a Christmas wrap swap at Christmas time to try and make people use what they've already got in their homes in terms of wrapping paper and gift bags and stuff like that, and that was received quite well. I think that just showed to people that just small actions can help influence them in their household as well. So yeah, it's a small but keen group, and they're willing to sort of help us with any initiatives that we're looking to run. We're looking to do a seed swap as well in a couple of weeks' time, for people to try and grow their own at home. So yeah, it's very much driven from within our team, and obviously everyone else has their own day job, so it is a network where they're giving up time within their working day. So that has its challenges, but it's a good group. They're certainly going to be helpful, I think, as the culture grows.
Yeah, no, that sounds good. That actually sounds like a reasonable sized group, to be honest with you. So yeah, very positive. Another question from David. David Garlick, I mean, does going beyond look towards negative zero as a target for a gold level?
Yes, essentially. So it's what we're looking to do is recognize as organizations that are going beyond just succeeding and actually looking at leading in this space. So that does look at ambition to put back more than they take out. So that would be looking at, net zero, carbon negative. Could also be looking at sort of, how they contribute more to the biodiversity sphere in terms of what they're actually putting back into the environment and things like that as well. So it's like I said, it's the idea of the criteria is to think about what does a leader look like? What does that sort of space mean to them? And different organizations will essentially have different pathways and shall we say almost different responsibilities placed upon them. So it's how they fill that space. But yeah, essentially it's pushing beyond just basic net zero. It's actually putting more back in than they took out.
Thank you. And
I've got a question. If there's a space,
go for it, Alexina.
It just came to me then. If we've still got time for this, I just wondered wanted you to talk a little bit about carbon offsets. Either of you, David or Joely, if you do get a number, you get a baseline your emissions, and then you've got to achieve net zero. Obviously, reduction is the first priority, but where do you both stand on the carbon offsetting, and how would an organisation or like a council go through that?
David, do you want to take that?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah,
so yeah, so it's an interesting, it's a conversation we have with organisations at the moment. So the definition of net zero and what a lot of the guidance is sort of talking about. So it's beyond offsetting. So net zero is predicated against carbon removals. So it's not just about offsetting or balancing your carbon emissions. It's actually about sequestering it from the environment and storing it. So for an organization to work towards that, they'll have to implement some form of scheme around carbon removals. Now, what that will look like, obviously, the space is still wide open. We're not quite sure what the industry will look like, because whilst it's the proven technology, it's still not yet at scale. For in the meantime, however, for organizations that are working towards net zero, then essentially the carbon offsetting would be the sort of, I guess, the step to look at now. And we would sort of look to work with the organization. And most importantly, as I said, the key thing for them is to demonstrate reductions in carbon emissions first, and then to offset any balance. And they have to essentially, as part of that process, demonstrate that improvement year on year as well. So it is one of those where we're sort of just keeping an eye on the space, but for organizations that are ready and at that point, then we would recommend they offset now with a view to remove when the industry allows them to do so.
Thank you.
And from a council's perspective, we've just started, actually, Martin's just been looking at offsetting. We had an interesting conversation with the Carbon Trust last week around sort of limits for offsetting in terms of the net zero targets. So there's not necessarily like a guidance yet for local authorities on what would be an acceptable tolerance for offsetting. I think David, you might know this more than me, but the Science Based Targets Initiative, which is obviously for corporate organisations, I think the limit is around 10% as an offset. So we would be looking to try and meet similar to that. So
I think it's shall we say, it's working towards that. So the idea between the Science-Based Target Initiative, and it is sectoral based, so different sectors will have different needs, but essentially the idea is that as an organization, you want to drive down your emissions to essentially a saving as close to 90% as you can get, so that you only literally have the unavoidable residual emissions left over. But as organizations are working towards that, the use of offsets, is certainly something to consider, because it does contribute back to the wider environment. And there's various projects you can do with offsetting whilst you're going on the journey, but the key thing is that they have to demonstrate that reduction. What we don't want is just an organization investing without actually doing any of the work themselves. So that's a key key point in this realm of offsetting. And particularly with the organizations we work with, that's what we help them develop, is that evidence that they're demonstrating reductions, and the offsetting is that last resort for them to do.
Yeah, that they have tried every other way to avoid it, and that's the sort of last resort type of thing.
Absolutely, yeah, because that 90% reduction is based against technology that's yet to actually come in. So we are still in a fairly heavy energy world where gas is still the key driver to that. And until we can shift away from fossil fuels, we just have to accept that they will exist for the while now, until we can replace them with something that is able to take that challenge on with less carbon emissions. So.
Yeah. Peter, sorry, you put something in the chat a little while ago, so it's taken a while to get to you. There was something that you wanted to put forward.
I'm old, I'm still surviving, so it doesn't matter.
Thank you.
We've been at this sort of thing for 33 years. We have a circular economy going all that time, and that we use any money that happens to come our way locally. So we won't be paying you £1,000 a year, because we'll put that £1,000 into actually doing stuff around here, the sort of stuff we've been doing for a very long time. So maybe you need a charitable arm and pick up a lot of other people who've been doing stuff for a long time, and get them into the, what do you have, a list of good people, good organizations. Just a thought. Then there's the carbon footprint, which keeps being mentioned, offsetting and all its stupidities and wickednesses that have gone on. But I haven't heard anybody here mentioning methane. Who's doing anything about methane use by gardeners in this area? We're not doing anything, but we certainly don't use it, and haven't for well more than 20 years. And another thing that occurs to me, which more or less anybody can do to anybody else at any time, is to advise them where they bank and where they get their insurance from, and where the pensions are in the scheme, because there are plenty of evil places where these can come from, and one or two pretty good ones. And we've advised a lot of small organizations, smaller than anything that's been talked about here by and large, certainly by you, David. And that sort of thing can easily be done. They don't have to take the advice, but at least it exists. So there's a whole lot of stuff going on for a long time now, and we're not going to easily play catch up on organizational stuff. Even if we're an organization, we just do what we do. I mean, we use 1 car a week for one journey on average. For instance, we don't use any electricity within the company, except I've got my computer on now, but that's at home. We don't have a dedicated place to do such stuff or to have to heat. Anyway, that sort of thing, the ground level stuff and the easy advice, and let's think of not so much carbon offsetting. Well, think of that by all means, but don't forget the other greenhouse gases, which can be a damn sight worse than CO2. And I said it when I put this in, I'd make a statement just to see what reactions, if any. Am I being awkward?
No, that's fine.
I'll try harder.
No, you're obviously right about methane. And does that form part? Sorry, question for Joely and David, I guess. Does methane form part of, because it's CO2 equivalent, isn't it? Is your actual baseline measurement? So does that take into account methane?
It's about 80 times worse than CO2. So I last read.
Well, I believe it. Yeah, go on.
Yeah, sorry. Yes, it does. So the carbon footprint, we refer to as carbon, but what we essentially do is we take the greenhouse gases and we convert them to the equivalence of carbon. So it's the culmination of all. It's 7 in total, but the main ones, carbon, methane, and nitrous oxide, are the 3 sort of core ones within that. And then obviously there's the man-made stuff like the refrigerants and stuff that goes into the technology we use. But yeah, so when we refer to a carbon footprint, we're taking into account that. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with organizations, as part of the process we work through is we do get them to look at their investments, look at the banks they work with, the funds they invest in, to make sure that actually they work with organizations that are shifting investments away from fossil companies and fossil fuel type things as well. So yeah, that's absolutely something we work with organizations to get them to do as well. So
thank you. Just a quick question for Joely from Bryony, and whether West Northamptonshire Council has a strategy for working with schools.
Not so much a strategy, but it's something we're starting to, a group we're trying to engage with now within our team. So we're doing a talk in a secondary school in a couple of weeks' time. We've got another one lined up for May. We did put some sort of feelers out there to try and run like a youth conference for secondary schools, because we're conscious that there's the eco schools movement, which is run by Keep Britain Tidy, but I think that's predominantly primary school age. They do have a secondary syllabus kind of thing, but I think mainly it's taken up by primary schools. So yeah, we were looking to just try and engage with secondary schools in the area. We did get quite a low response, so it wasn't kind of feasible for us to run an event at that time, but those that did show an interest are the 2 schools that we're now going into to try and engage with them, and that will hopefully just again grow as there's more sort of drive to make the change. So yeah, yes. it's a group we're starting to now try and engage with.
Okay, that's great.
Thank you. Can I jump in, Jane?
Yes, please do.
So that's really good to hear. I think that's really fantastic that you're engaging with young people. It's something within Corn we've discussed many times. Yeah. I was really thinking probably more from a school estate point of view, because obviously a lot of schools are LEA funded, and so they're council funded, and they've got kind of those sort of inbuilt carbon issues with their heating and with resources, and a sort of it's the double-sided thing, isn't it? It's kind of the engagement with pupils and young people who generally are pretty engaged, but also from that kind of school estate point of view, in the same way that we've heard previously from people from the hospital who are kind of making changes, systemic changes within the hospital, so that those organizations are greener. So I was kind of looking at it from both points of view, but that's good to hear. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, that's a good point. There is sort of 2 angles to that, really, isn't there? Yeah, the schools were their gas and electricity usage were brought into the baseline emissions report. So yeah, there will need to be some work done with them in terms of reducing their energy demand. Anyway, it's not something we've got to yet, but yeah, there will need to be some more work done with them.
Right. I'm gonna ask one more question, then we'll wrap it up, because I'm conscious that we've gone through nearly an hour with the 2 of you, and I think that's been really useful. Just my very last question, just following from that schools point. Waste management within schools seems to be something that really needs addressing, because the primary school that I'm school governor of doesn't have any recycling collections, which feels, like something that really ought to be done better.
Yes, yeah, it's true. Yeah. I think that's probably something with the waste team as well. I don't know kind of the arrangements in terms of collections from schools. I don't know. I think some is commercial arrangements, isn't it? But I don't know if some are predominantly local authority collections. So yes, yeah, there is stuff that needs to be done with schools, definitely, but that would be sort of with colleagues in the waste team as well. So yeah, something I can take away definitely and ask.
Thank you very much. Thank you both very much indeed for your time this evening. I think that's been really interesting. I've definitely learned a lot, certainly about the Investors in the Environment scheme and about what West Northamptonshire Council is doing. And I feel like I think everybody has started on this journey perhaps a bit too late, but it's really good to know that some very positive steps are being taken. And thanks everyone for your engagement, for lots of questions, which I think has led to a really nice, useful discussion. The two of you are very welcome
Thank
to
you.
stay on and listen to the rest of the meeting. We've got a few other bits to cover on the agenda, but please feel free to drop off now if you don't want to hear that.
Yeah, I've
And
got
thank you so
kids
much for your time.
sort out,
Yes,
but,
I'm sure you
no,
have. Yes, yeah, yeah.
Thank you very much for everyone for listening to me and for allowing me to come and speak to you guys today.
No,
Enjoy the
thank
rest
you.
of your meeting and your evening, and
Yeah.
we'll hopefully speak soon. Cheers,
Thanks,
guys.
Really
thanks,
appreciate it. Thank you very
David.
much.
Thank you.
Right, bye-bye.
Thank you. Yeah, I'll drop off too now, Jane, if
Yeah,
that's
that's
okay.
fine.
But
No,
you
absolutely
know,
fine.
kind of, you know where we are as a team.
Yes, indeed.
And obviously, we're happy to kind of help and attend these meetings as and when you need us to.
Lovely. Yeah, really
All right,
appreciate
guys.
that. Thank you very
No
much.
problem.
Cheers.
Nice to see you
Thank
all.
you. Cheers.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye. So before we move on to the other items on the agenda, I'm just going to answer a question that Dave has put into the chat, which is really more for us than for either David or Joely, which is whether, oh no, it says it was, does WNC, sorry, have a list of like-minded local organisations? So perhaps we should have asked that question. I do apologise, Dave, I missed that one. I didn't see it said WNC. I thought it was a question for us because we kind of do have a list, but yeah.
That's fine. I could understand the challenge is likely to be get the message out there of that they're available or that this is the activity that the council are doing. And by that, I think it could be a push from us back to them as well, because Joely is responsible for doing things that the council have got as their activity. But as we've heard on the call tonight, a lot of people are interested in how can we push this further, and the council have got a good leadership role in doing that. Certainly setting the standard as best they can.
And certainly the message that I've received from them when talking to them previously is that they will be pursuing in parallel the piece that Joely was primarily talking about tonight, which is them reducing their carbon emissions and other issues, but also which is the 2030 target, but also at the same time pursuing the 2045 target of getting the whole area down. So that feels like where that piece would come in, because they definitely need to do a lot to engage with local organisations and groups that are already doing things or want to and just need some support and guidance. So I only had a couple of other items on the agenda, which is lucky because we've only got 11 minutes left. The first one of those is about upcoming events, the key one of which is we have a face-to-face social event, a Corn social event, but open to anybody that wants to come along, in Towcester at the Sawpit Centre, which is on Richmond Road in Towcester, on Saturday afternoon at 1:30. It is a really very informal event. It's sort of headlined as tea and cake with corn, the emphasis very much on cake. So if anybody is around, you don't have to cut. So it's running from 1:30 till 4. There's no need to come and stay for the whole time. Just pop in for 10 minutes or half an hour, whatever you've got to spare. We'd love to see lots of people there. We hope to be showcasing some artworks that some students at the University of Northampton have done for us. So that should be interesting to see. Harry and I have seen them sort of in a partially finished state already, so we're quite excited to see what they look like when they're completely finished. So that will be really interesting. But generally, it's just a chance to meet and talk to people face to face. It feels like we just haven't had enough opportunity to do that since we went online with our meetings a couple of years ago, really. And the only other event I wanted to briefly mention is one that Joely mentioned to me right at the start of the meeting before other people joined. And if you go right back to the start of the chat, she put a link to a sustainability summit that's being run by the University of Northampton. It is more targeted towards businesses and individuals because there is a £100 delegate fee. But if any of you are part of businesses or know of businesses that might be interested in something like that, it looks like a positive initiative for the university to be taking. And yes, Rupert.
What time do you want cakes on Saturday? And aren't you tree planting beforehand?
No, we were going to be tree planting. Sorry. Probably
I must take that
fully
out of my calendar then.
Yes, yes. Sorry, I need to probably send a message and just remind everybody of that. Perhaps I haven't communicated that very well. So the original intention was that a site had been identified within Towcester for planting some trees to form a hedge along the Silverstone Brook. This was the original site identification was done by somebody else, but we picked the project up later on because they had already gone down the route of securing permission to plant there. But when Harry went down to look at the site, he came to the conclusion, I think probably quite quickly, Harry, that it wasn't actually suitable for the proposed planting, and that actually it would probably have been met with it would not have been welcomed by local people because it just wasn't the right place to be putting things. I don't know whether you want to say anything more about that, Harry, or not.
Yes, thank you, Jane. Well, it's a bit embarrassing, really, because we leapt at the opportunity of showing what clever, good environmental people we were, and we agreed with the Woodland Trust to take charge of 105 saplings, which did turn up. But when I went down to have a look at the site, it had already been beautifully landscaped, and the place which we'd been given permission to plant was in fact a vista across this stream, which would have been filled up. Not only that, but children play down there during the summer, and it would be quite dangerous if they were hidden behind any trees that we planted. So the saplings that did turn up, I found a great home in a new woodland that's being planted in the north of the county. And we've got some good contacts with an organisation called Groundwork. And one of their people who was working in Delapre Abbey yesterday came to collect the saplings which Woodland Trust had delivered the day before. So, and they're going to be in the ground tomorrow, which is absolutely fantastic. So, yeah. A good result, but slightly peculiar for all involved.
Yes.
But we have got this opportunity of meeting on Saturday in the post-planting social event.
Yes.
So
post-planting, but we're not actually doing the planting. So
planting anyway, done by proxy.
Yeah. Yes. But yeah, I think we have at least played a part in having more trees planted, and as Harry says, they're going to a place where they've got a very well organised team in place, so they will be looked after. They're not just being dumped in the ground in a random spot.
Can I also mention that we went to the Towcester Town Council annual general meeting and met with the people who had given us very kindly permission. And they do get people being enthusiastic about planting, and we said we would cooperate with anything that they couldn't manage themselves. So we've made some good contacts in the south of West Northants region.
Yeah.
Well, I come in if anybody is dreadfully disappointed about not planting trees now. When it gets back to tree planting time, which more or less ends at the end of March and restarts in about November, we expect to be planting a goodly number of trees following in November. And we will be doing it in Northampton. Like everything we do, it's in Northampton.
Will you be looking for volunteers to help with that, Peter?
If they wish to volunteer, they'll be welcome. Yes.
Yeah. Great, thank you. I think that would be brilliant. And for anybody who hasn't visited,
sorry, you'll have to remind me.
I'll try.
At my age, there's no way I'm going to remember from now to November.
He's 6 months away. Yes. I was just going to say, for anybody that hasn't visited the orchards that that Peter runs as part of Southcote Environmental, it is well worth a visit. And they've got a number of events coming up as well there, which are on the What's On page on Corn Exchange. So please do have a look at those and go if you're able to.
You've also reminded me that, and I don't know if this is on your events page, tomorrow night at Abington Lodge, we're having the Nettle Nosh night, where we eat all things stinging nettles and learn about how excellent they are for all sorts of different purposes. So
that is on our events page. So there's a very nice poster and the details on there. So if anybody wants to, is interested in have a look at Corn Exchange.
stuff.
And I'm very excited to bring you a piece of breaking news. Those of you who attended our January meeting and saw our very first guest speaker, Dr. Paul Slater, talking about sustainability in the NHS, and in particular in relation to anaesthetic gases, he's won a Sustainability Champion Award this evening. He's at an awards ceremony, for all the work that he's done. It's fantastic, isn't it? I'll read out the citation, if that's okay. It says, Paul has been a huge driving force behind the green actions of the anaesthetic department. As a result, the hospital exceeded national and regional targets for the reduction of desflurane, an anaesthetic gas, and was recognised locally as an example of best practice. This resulted in a carbon and financial saving of hundreds of tonnes of CO2 and tens of thousands of pounds every year. That is brilliant, isn't it?
Yeah.
It just goes to show what people can do. So that one other thing I just wanted to mention briefly before we wrap up, which is a very quick update on the Building Resilience project, just to recap on that for people that perhaps haven't heard much about that before. This started off as a project last year looking at fuel poverty, and quickly what's the word I'm looking for? Transitioned into something more around energy efficiency, because we felt that obviously fuel poverty could be addressed by improving energy efficiency, and actually that was something that people needed even if they could afford their energy bills. We're currently working with a company based in Weedon that has a lot of specialist expertise in assessing the thermal performance of buildings, to do reports on 10 pilot houses, some of the houses which are people who are here, including mine. So what they are doing is putting data loggers in place to assess temperature and humidity within the homes and compare that against actual energy usage, and that will provide a report with some initial recommendations and potentially further assessment tools if house owners want to go down that route. But this is a programme that we're quite keen to roll out more widely, because I think we're all aware that there is a lot of need to increase the energy efficiency of homes. The figure which we often give is that we've got over 170,000 households within West Northamptonshire, and well over half of those are below rating C on the EPC assessment. So we are definitely using more energy than we need to. We hope that those...
Did you give the name of the company?
Yes, they're called Build Test Solutions. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, they are. They're called Build Test Solutions.
Thank you.
And one of the reasons we wanted to engage with them, apart from the fact that they have got a lot of expertise in this area, is that they are just about testing and assessing building performance. So they're not about then trying to sell you insulation or sell you heat pumps or solar panels or anything like that. So it's sort of it is a report with no sort of strings coming along with it.
I had Rachel around today putting the things in my house, and she's lovely and very knowledgeable. And yes, she's the daughter of the person who drew up plans for me. So it was. She said, "Oh, that's my dad's plan that I'm looking at."
Fancy that.
So that was a coincidence.
Yes. No, I have to say, she came out to mind the other day. She is, she is very good, very knowledgeable, and actually a parish councillor as well. So exactly. Obviously got a social conscience as well as a professional interest in this area.
We talked and talked and talked.
What's the name of the company that's doing it?
Build Test Solutions. They're based at the depot in Weedon.
Oh, right. Yeah. Okay.
And it's we're not trying to advertise their services particularly. It's just that those are the people that we're using.
No, that is something of interest in our group, the Building Resilience programme.
Yes. Well, we'll certainly be sharing the output of that. The loggers, as Rupert is saying, are being put into houses this week. They will need to be there for 3 weeks, and then obviously the data processed to come up with the reports.
And I've still got the camera Yeah, if anybody would like me to come round and take pictures of your house on a cold day or at night, to show where your house is leaking or where the heat's going out or the cold's coming in, it does show things. I think I've got the hang of it now.
Oh, excellent. I'm really glad to hear that, Rupert.
Well, I found out how to download it onto my computer. So I
That's
can
a
just plug
thermal
it into
camera,
your
by the way.
laptop and you can download the photographs from it without having to use the cloud and everything else they wanted us to do. So and you can just play around with it, take as many pictures as you want. They don't cost anything to take.
Yeah. Yes. The wonders of digital photography. Harry, were you going to say something?
Well, I was just going to say it's a thermal camera. Rupert wasn't quite clear on that.
Oh, yes, thermal imaging camera.
Thermal imaging camera, yes.
You're not just taking it snaps.
Yeah, it shows blue where the heat's going, the cold's coming into the house, and red where the on the outside where the heat's going out.
I wonder if I could explain why we went to this company in Whedon.
Please, yes.
It's because we looked at the energy performance certification process, the factors that are taken into account, and that there is a bit more to life of a building than the EPC can pick up. So it's no criticism of the EPC process. It is a criticism of the need we feel to understand the thermal characteristic of our homes, which is more than just what an EPC will pick up. And these people have got the ability to look at the what they call the coefficient of energy use for a home. And we're quite excited to get involved with this experimentally to see whether or not, as a group, we can add something to the kind of normal home energy assessment process. There are some people down in Bristol doing something similar, but I'm not sure whether there's anyone in this region who are adding to the exercise of energy assessment. And the report, by the way, will be shared with everybody, but it won't come out until we've done all these assessments on our homes.
Yeah, thank you. And yes, just in response to a couple of notes in the chat about congratulations to Dr. Slater, then yes, more than happy to send a note on our behalf. And I think we can also do a little bit of a write-up and put it on Corn Exchange as well. I think it deserves publicity. So we're now just after 9 o'clock, which should have been the formal end. Does anybody have any other business or anything that they particularly wanted to mention, anything that any of you wanted to say before we close for the evening?
Yes, I had a question. I wondered, can anyone I think these talks that we've been doing are great, and I don't know, have we got a list of sort of the next one for April or May, June, or if we don't, if anyone has any suggestions of interesting people we can get in on
yes, that's a really good point.
Please shout. I do know somebody who knows quite a lot about the circular economy, because that was a question tonight, and I wondered if that might be an idea. But I
think
please say if you can think of anyone.
So we have a confirmed speaker for May. This lady is the sustainability manager. I think it's got a longer title than that, but I can't remember the rest of it. Perhaps sustainability and environmental manager for Grand Union Homes, who are a very large social housing provider, who cover all the social housing that within the old South Northamptonshire and I think Daventry areas. Harry and I had a conversation with her the other day. She's got a really interesting and refreshing approach, which really comes back to something which Joely was saying earlier on about how to engage with people, because you said their customers, i.e. their tenants, because it's social housing, obviously are not people who are necessarily particularly well off and perhaps not overly bothered about climate change, but they are really interested in being warm and bringing down their fuel bills. So it's about sort of trying to engage with people. So making the issue of energy efficiency relevant to them. So hopefully she'll come and give us some really interesting insights into that. I potentially may have a speaker for April, but she hasn't confirmed yet. So we'll see. But yes, absolutely. If anybody's got any ideas or topics that you want to hear about, so that we can find a speaker on, or ideas for speakers that you think would be interesting, then please do let us know.
And the same goes for the Corn Exchange, the forum. If anyone wants to any ideas for what we could write about, or if anyone wants to write about anything, again, shout, and your voice will be heard.
Yes. And on that, one of the regular features that we have on Corn Exchange is reporting from local groups who are active in sort of climate and environmental sphere. And I have already booked Emmy to do something on the floor group, John, in a few months' time. So yeah, but again, if anyone has anything in the area that they'd like to report back to us, we'd be happy to hear it. Any more for any more?
I did attend an acre event last week, or a week or two ago. There is a group in Cyrisham, climate change group. They've got Cyrisham Village.
Yes, and Parry and I are actually going to their parish meeting in May sometime, I think. Yes, and they had a climate change fair last year, which we went to, and they are having another one in September, which I think we are also hoping to go to.
Okay.
Yes, but there are lots and lots of local groups, and one of the things that we're really keen to do is try and connect those groups up so that they can learn from each other. And get support and encouragement from each other as well.
Yeah, I might get you to come to Floor Parish Council.
Yeah, I'm sure we'd be happy to do that.
In due course.
Yes. David.
Just to, on that note, Northampton Environmental Network, which Peter tells me he set up decades ago, but has stopped, is restarting. So hopefully we can get that list of the Northampton groups added to the Corn list.
Yeah. And you know, if you want more people to attend the meetings of that network, David, if you can let me know the meeting dates, we can certainly put those out.
Yeah, if you've got anybody in Northampton is welcome to come along. And as I always say, climate change knows no boundaries. So anybody from anywhere in the county or elsewhere would be welcome.
Thank you.
But David and I simply were people who went along representing our various groups. But if I send you the name and email of the guy who's running it, Jane, then you can get it from the horse's mouth.
Yeah, that'd be helpful. Thank you, Peter.
Rachel was talking to me today about Northants and how they've been classifying all the houses in the area. Do you know about this, Harry? The Northants have done a computer thing where they put all the houses according to their EPC rating, and they've done a virtual Northants against actual, and how they could bring things up to, get the rating up and what they could achieve through it. I don't know, I'm rather vague about it, but I think it's something we ought to find out about it. So you're going to a Northants meeting, aren't you?
Yes, so perhaps we'll find out more about that there.
Who's going? Have you got enough people going to that, haven't you? I didn't.
We have, yes.
Yeah. Well, perhaps you could raise it.
Yes. No, that's a very good point. Very interesting to know what they're doing. And yeah, perhaps we have got a couple of contacts within. I presume, is this a Northants Council initiative?
I think so. It's how they're tackling it. So I mean, rather than doing what West Northants is doing, is messing about with accreditation, they're actually getting on with getting all the houses classified and to see what they've got in their housing stock and what a lowering of their rating or raising of the rating, where the priorities are and what it would achieve. But it's only based on.
It would be interesting to know exactly what that involves. personally, I feel like if it's a purely desk-based exercise, there's a limited amount to be learned, but perhaps that's oversimplifying.
Well, that's what we want to know, isn't it? Really?
It is
so
exactly.
Find out.
Yes, it is.
That'd be good.
Right. So I'll wrap up there. Thank you all so much for coming along. Hopefully you found that useful. I found that a really interesting presentation, I have to say, and some stimulating discussion afterwards as well. So hope to see you all soon. I hope to see some of you on Saturday. Thank you very much. Lovely to see you, Ken. Bye. Best wishes to Ben.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.
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 Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for that, Jane. I wasn't aware that, even having spoken to Joely and Felicity, that the council were involved with IIE. So that has made me think I need to rejig my thinking. There's no point in me trying to get CAT involved in helping the council, because they're going to say, well, actually, we're working with IIE now. So
yes,
it's not a bad organisation. I'm sure it'll drag them kicking and screaming, or possibly not kicking or screaming, but drag them willingly along. But
well, I mean,
it ticks the box of them doing something.
yes.
Well, yes, it ticks the box, but in a positive way, Harry. Ticking boxes can have two connotations. One, because you've done it well, and one just so you get the box ticked.
Yeah, I'm not very familiar with the investing environment thing. I'd like to think, because it's a formal external accreditation, that you have got to achieve a certain standard. So it does tell you more than them just reporting that they've done stuff.
The reports will be interesting.
Jane, have you got time to hang around a bit?
Yes, I have. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
I shall leave you.
Yeah.
Leave you in peace, unless.
Thanks, David. I think I'm going to see you next week, aren't I? At a sustainable food meeting, probably.
Thursday, I think. Yeah.
Thursday. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. And was that, you said that item was interesting, Harry? Was it really interesting, or just of interest?
The cheese. No, really interesting. I
haven't read it yet
about it, but I've been trying to follow I don't want to go into too much detail, but the whole approach of looking at a house holistically is new for me, because I kind of followed the energy performance certificate, the assessor approach, and I could understand how all that worked. But the more that you look into it, you realize that the thermodynamics of the building fabric are really quite important. And the cheese people use something that the Whedon people are also using, which is to use